Hi everybody, my name is Una Began and I'm really delighted to be here today to present this European Erasmus Plus research project and to let you know how far we're getting on. This project is called TRAINengPDP and I'm really just going to start by introducing our team, talk about the objectives of the project, give you a little bit of detail on work packages 1 and 2, which we're just about to finish, and just highlight some of our next steps. So TRAINengPDP stands for Training Engineers for Lifelong Learning through a Personal Development Process. So as you can see here, there's really two aspects to this project. One is about developing lifelong learning skills in our engineering students, and secondly, to look at a personal development process to sort of assist them in a sort of a lifelong learning attitude. The project is an Erasmus Plus project. The academic lead is Leuven, and it's myself in TU Dublin and my colleague in LUT University as well. So I'd just like to thank Amy and Katrina, who are working with me in TU Dublin, and my colleagues in Leuven and LUT as well. We're supported with associate partners in CEFI, the Educational Development Unit, Engineers Ireland, IENet and Tech. So this project has 3 objectives. It's about lifelong learning and it's about a personal development process, but we're looking particularly at engineering students in assisting them in developing their own personal development process as they go through engineering education. Separately to that, a lot of the literature says that lecturers don't feel they have sufficient background or training to assist students. So we're going to have a work package that is more about training lecturers and providing a toolkit for lecturers to assist them in that process. And our final objective was just to increase awareness about the competences for lifelong learning. Before we get into the detail, I wanted to explain where we have come up with the lifelong learning competences. And this is a reference to a paper by Cruz on a systematic review, which kind of identified that lifelong learning was a container concept that contained these 5 competences in particular. And I think Mariana is with us on the call today, so welcome, Mariana. They are creating a learning plan, self-monitoring, self-reflection, locating and scrutinizing information, and having a motivation and a curiosity to learn. So there are 4 key work packages in the project. The first work package, which TU Dublin are looking after, is really just a as is. Where are we at currently in terms of what we do for students in developing their lifelong learning skills and competences? And I'll talk a little bit about that more in a few minutes. Work package 2 is really our literature review to look at best practice that happens outside of the realm of engineering as well, but just to look at what's being done at the moment and what can we possibly develop or build upon in our project. Once we have work package 1 and 2 complete, then we're going to work with students in particular and with lecturers too. And again, these will be in parallel. So for our students, we're going to run pilot projects with different interventions in 3 universities that are involved in the project and get some measurement of how effective they felt that was. And on the other side, we're working with lecturers to create a pilot training kit for them and have a kind of trial that and get feedback on how useful that was so that we can create what we're calling a PDP toolkit to give to lecturers to assist them in the project. As you can see, we've quite a lot of project results, but at the moment we're really just coming to the end of work package 1 and work package 2. And I should have said we just started this project in March of this year. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the work that we've already completed. And as I mentioned, the first work package was about identifying where we're currently at. What are we doing currently? So we have 2 research questions here. The first was to look really broadly at what are we doing in our engineering programs in terms of learning outcomes in relation to engineering competences, interpersonal competences, and intrapersonal competences. And then as a sort of more granular exercise, we wanted to look specifically at those lifelong learning competences to see what we are currently assessing in our engineering programs. So the methodology for this first part was to take a bachelor and a master program from each of the 3 universities in the project. And we mapped out all of the learning outcomes from each of the modules and courses against each of those competences that I've just mentioned. We did this independently with at least 2 researchers, and then we came together to agree the mapping exercise just to give a bit of validity to the work that we were doing. So if I start at a high level and we were thinking about what's the current competences in our engineering program or what's the current learning outcomes, we referred to an ASCE study in 2018 which identified 3 key types of competences, which you can see here. So there's intrapersonal, which you'll see lifelong learning is a part of, interpersonal, which is more about dealing with other people, and of course engineering competence, or what we might call technical engineering competences. This is just a snapshot of one of the findings that we have. I do have a full report. I'm very happy to send it to anyone who'd like to see it. Just type your name in the chat and I can pick that up. But what we're looking at here is in our mapping of the bachelor's programs, 63% of them mapped against engineering competences, which, as you can probably imagine, is no surprise. But there was quite a good blend, I thought, between interpersonal competences and intrapersonal at 18 and 19% for the bachelor's programs. What's interesting is when we move to the master's programs, there is a reduction in engineering competences and more of a focus on intrapersonal, which is things like critical thinking, ethics, conscientiousness, and so on. So it's really good to see that that is progressing as we move from bachelor's to master's programs. When we looked specifically at the lifelong learning competencies, it's a bit of a, well, let's just say there's lots of room for improvement. When we look at the bachelor's program, really very few of our learning outcomes map to these competences. The only positive, I guess, is that locating and scrutinizing information, you can see there is 3.6% in the bachelor's and up to 8% in the master's. A lot of that mapping exercise really referred back to the final year project or the capstone project, where we do let students go off and they really have to work in a more self-directed way to find things out. So it's probably not surprising that those are higher percentages. What's a bit more concerning is that we didn't find one learning outcome in any of the 3 master's programs that mapped to creating a learning plan, self-reflection, or having motivation and curiosity to learn. So there's lots of opportunities there, I think, to fill those gaps as we move forward in the project. The final thing in relation to this output is that because it's an Erasmus project and we want to learn from each other, we identified it in terms of the different university programs. We also looked at the spread across year 1 to year 4 or year 1 to year 3 in bachelor programs, and we have all of that detail in the report. But what we're saying here is that KU Leuven are doing some good work in terms of self-reflection, and TU Dublin and LUT are doing some work in terms of, motivation and curiosity to learn. So the next step in the project is really to look at those good practice examples to see how we can learn and spread that amongst the other universities. Just moving quickly then to our output of project result 2, which was really a literature review.
You have 2 minutes left.
Perfect, thanks Eddie. When we look at the literature about lifelong learning interventions, we're looking at student-centered teaching methods such as project-based learning, a focus on e-portfolios, one-to-one sessions with a mentor, reflective journals, and peer and self-assessment. The literature review, which looked at PDP interventions, also shows us that there is some commonality here. They're talking about e-portfolios, reflective writing, and again, those sort of peer conversations, looking at discussing progress and mentoring as we go along. So we're really going to combine those 2 findings, where we're currently at in terms of the learning outcomes associated with lifelong learning, and what we've read in the literature as good practice to look at the next steps on the project. The next thing we're going to do is to survey students and lecturers to identify what their perceptions are of lifelong learning competences, what they are, where they're taught, how well they're incorporated into our programs, and we'll use that information then when we develop the pilots. I mentioned that we're going to combine the information about the different types of interventions and the different competences that we want to develop, and we're going to create this matrix that will sort of identify what intervention might be appropriate for a first year class of 150, or what might be appropriate for a master's class of 10 students, and what competences they might develop. Using that matrix then, we're going to pilot these interventions with students in the 3 universities and get some feedback on how useful they were. And as I said, in parallel, we're going to organise this training programme for lecturers and then get feedback to create a PDP toolkit. So the last thing is, if you're interested in having your engineering programs mapped or getting involved in the project, please just type your name into the chat and I'll be very happy to follow up with you afterwards. that was the end of my time. Thanks very much, Eddie. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks, Leuven.